Hello and welcome to this tutorial. I'm going to teach you how to Tunisian crochet from scratch in this video, and by the end, if you stick with it, we'll have made a dishcloth together. We'll start, as many crochet projects do, with a slip knot. Hold the yarn against your hand with the free end pointing down, hold it between your thumb and index finger, and wrap it twice around your index finger so that you have 2 loops on your finger. Hold both strands with your thumb and middle finger and keep them snug. Now use your fingers or a crochet hook and pick up the leftmost loop and lift it up and over the right one. My hook gets stuck here. Then pick up what is now the left loop and pull it up and over the right one again, but this time pull it all the way off your finger. Then just lift your index finger up to tighten the knot, and you now have a loop that you can place on your hook and pull on the yarn strands to tighten it. People hold their hooks all kinds of different ways, but here's how I do it. I grab the working yarn attached to the ball with my baby finger and hold it so that I can control the tension. Then I place my index finger under the yarn so that I can hold it up and lift that finger up as I work to control the tension further. Then I just grab onto the project somewhere with my thumb and middle finger. I've got the yarn tail here, or I might hold onto the slip knot itself for better stability. We're going to start our project by making a foundation chain. We work a chain by simply grabbing the yarn with the hook and pulling it through the loop that's on the hook. We're going to do that a total of 27 times, so don't worry, you'll see me do it lots more. Now, when you grab the yarn, that is called doing a yarn over. What you're doing is you're placing the hook in front of the yarn and wrapping the yarn around the hook by bringing it up and over the top of the hook. Then pulling that new loop through the old loop to create a new loop on the hook is called pulling up a loop. So we'll use those terms again later in the pattern. Now you just keep repeating those 2 steps over and over and create a sort of a chain of loops that looks a bit like sideways V's interlocked together. So this is called a chain. Once you've done that exactly 27 times, you should have a pretty long chain that looks something like this. The end has the slip knot attached that we started with. This is the front of the chain, so again, the sideways V's. If you rotate the chain towards you 90 degrees, you'll see that the other side, the back side of the chain, consists of these little bumps. Those are called the back bumps. So here is one, and here are 2 others. That's what you'll see on the back side of your chain. We're going to work our first stitch into the second one of those back bumps from the hook. So identify it in your project, insert the hook into it, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Now we have 2 loops on the hook, and we'll work the next stitch into the next back bump. Insert under the back bump, yarn over, pull up a loop. Now we have 3 loops on the hook. So again, identify the next back bump, insert the hook into it, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Each time keeping the loops on the hook so that we're accumulating more and more new loops on the hook as we go along. Basically what we're doing here is a Tunisian simple stitch. So inserting into a stitch, yarning over, and pulling up a loop, keeping that loop on the hook, is the basis of Tunisian crochet. It's fast, it's simple, it's very soothing, and I love it. I hope you do as well. Here we are at the end. We have exactly 1 back bump left to work into. It has the slip knot attached to it. So just work it in the same way, insert the hook into it, yarn over, and pull up a loop. You should have exactly 27 loops on the hook at this point, the same number of times that we worked a chain. Now it's time to work the Tunisian return pass. This is worked the same way at the end of each row. Yarn over and pull through 1 stitch on the hook, then yarn over and pull through 2 stitches on the hook. So we're going to repeat that last part all the way down the line. So yarn over and pull through 2 stitches, yarn over, and pull through 2 stitches on the hook. And just keep repeating that over and over again, all the way back to where we started from. Keep doing it until you have 1 stitch remaining on the hook. Yarn over, pull through 2. Skipping almost to the end, I have 2 stitches remaining. If I do that one more time, yarn over and pull through both loops, I have one stitch remaining and the return pass is finished. Let's take a look now at what we have. Tunisian stitches consist of these vertical bars, shown here in yellow in this variegated yarn, and a chain that we created with the return pass shown in this orange color. Each vertical bar is actually a loop that runs through the return pass chain, so it has a front and a back loop. When we work our Tunisian stitches, we're going to be inserting the hook between those front and back loops. We're always going to skip the rightmost vertical bar on the edge of the work because it actually corresponds to the loop that we already have on the hook. So we'll skip that first one and start working in the second stitch. As I said, when we work Tunisian simple stitch, we insert the hook behind the front loop of the stitch, not in between two stitches, so not in between in this space here, and not behind both the front and back loops, in between the front and back loops, so just behind the front vertical bar. Yarn over, pull up a loop and pull it through that stitch. Again, just like in row 1, keeping that new loop on the hook. So that is the Tunisian simple stitch, and we're going to do that into every vertical bar down the line. So insert the hook from right to left, yarn over, and pull up a loop, keeping the new loop on the hook. Now we have 3 loops. Insert, yarn over, and pull up a loop. You will become very fast at this very quickly, and you're going to do this a total of 26 times. Working across this entire row in Tunisian simple stitch is not actually necessary for this pattern. On the next row, I'm going to teach you how to do the honeycomb stitch, which is very simple as well, but we're just working in Tunisian simple stitch for this first row to practice. Once we get to the end, we've just worked the last normal looking vertical bar. Then we have this sort of messy looking thing at the edge of the project. It's called the Tunisian final stitch. What you're going to do is rotate the work towards you slightly so that you can identify the 2 loops sort of in a V shape that are right on the edge of the project. So rotate the work. It's in the color white in this particular project. Just pull out on it if it's a little messy and identify those 2 loops. It looks like an upside down V. You're going to work the Tunisian final stitch by inserting the hook under both of those loops, which is a little different than we worked the others. Then, as usual, yarn over and pull the yarn through both of those loops. And you're going to work the Tunisian final stitch that exact same way at the end of every row. Then, as we did after row 1, work the return pass by yarning over and pulling through 1, then yarn over and pull through 2. And keep repeating that until you have 1 stitch remaining on the hook. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Skipping ahead to the end of that, yarn over and pull through 2 a final time, and row 2 is completed. Now for round 3, we're going to start working in honeycomb stitch. This is where you alternate between working 1 simple stitch and 1 purl stitch all the way down the row. We just need to learn the purl stitch and then we can work this lovely textured stitch pattern. Start by skipping the right bar on the edge and working 1 simple stitch. Now, a purl stitch starts by yarning forward. This is where you bring the yarn in front of the hook by simply placing the hook behind the working yarn. It's not a yarn over where you bring the yarn up and over the top of the hook. You actually swing the yarn under the hook. So some patterns will call this a yarn under. Just place the hook behind the working yarn. Then the rest of it is worked the same. So insert from right to left behind the back loop of the vertical bar as we've been doing all along. Let the yarn forward fall in front of the stitch. You might want to hold the yarn forward down just to keep it out of the way with your thumb while you're getting used to this stitch. Yarn over in the usual way and pull the loop back through from left to right. So just like we did for Tunisian simple stitch. Now we're going to alternate between purls and simples, so the next stitch is worked as a simple stitch, the same as we've been doing. Let's work another purl together. Yarn forward, Insert the hook from right to left in the usual way. Let the yarn fall in front of the stitch as you yarn over and pull up a loop from left to right. Work another simple stitch, and then a purl stitch, yarn forward, insert, and pull it back through the other way. And keep alternating between simple and purl stitch all the way down the row. Now you'll see that I don't always hold the yarn forward down with my thumb. Sometimes I do, but I usually don't. But I do remember needing to do that at first to keep that out of the way when I worked my purl stitches. Tunisian purl stitch is a little weird and awkward at first. It definitely takes longer to do than a simple stitch, but once you're used to it, you'll fly through this honeycomb stitch pattern. And it really does create a beautiful textured pattern that doesn't curl up on the edges. As opposed to working straight in simple stitch, it has an aggressive curling tendency. So I really prefer honeycomb and other textured patterns to doing simple stitch for every single row. So here we are, we've done our simples and purls together and we're almost at the end. Once you get to the Tunisian final stitch, it is worked the same way regardless of where you land in your alternating simple purl pattern. So here the last stitch lands on a simple stitch because the second last one was worked as a purl. So there's the last regular vertical bar worked. The Tunisian final is always worked the same way. Rotate that edge chain towards you so that you can identify those two loops. Here they're shown in yellow with, again, the yarn variegation. So you can easily pick them out from the previous row. Insert the hook under both of those loops and yarn over, pull up a loop. Then, as always, the Tunisian return pass is worked in the same way. Yarn over and pull through one just once, and then yarn over, pull through two the rest of the way down the line. So skipping to the end of that, there's the end of the return pass finished. Now we're going to take another close look at the fabric that we've created. To create honeycomb stitch, we always want to work a simple stitch into a stitch that was purled in the previous row and vice versa. So let's see if we can distinguish simples from purls in our finished row. The purl stitches always have a bump at the base of the vertical bar. To me it looks like a scarf knotted in front of the neck. The simple stitches look like the scarf is wrapped around the back of the neck. There is no bump. To show you what I mean, here is a purl bump at the base of this vertical bar. Here's another one. And here's a third one. Now the Tunisian simple stitches in between lack that bump, and I hope you can see that it looks like the yarn is wrapped around the back of their necks. So those are simple stitches. So if you can identify that difference in your work, you will always know whether you should be working a simple or a purl stitch to start the row, because again, always work a simple into a purl and a purl stitch into a simple stitch. However, if you have trouble identifying those stitches in your work at first, don't worry. You can always just follow a 2-row repeat, and this is specified in the written pattern. The pattern tells you that for this next row, you will start the row with a purl stitch, and then the next row you will start with a simple stitch, and the next one with a purl. So it just alternates like that. But that does require you to keep track of which row you're on. So I prefer to just look at the work and figure out whether to start with a purl or a simple. This first stitch was worked as a simple stitch, so we will start by working a purl. So always remembering to skip the rightmost stitch that is right on the edge, yarn forward, insert into that second stitch, let the yarn fall forward, yarn over, and pull through from left to right. So that's our purl stitch. Now as I work this simple stitch, hopefully you can see there the very obvious yellow purl bump at the base, which confirms that we're doing the right thing by working that as a simple stitch. The next one doesn't have one of those, so we know that we're going to purl it. So even if we lose track of where we are in the repeating purl simple pattern, we can always just look at the work and know what we're supposed to work next, a purl stitch or a simple. If you do keep an eye on that as well, it'll help you identify if you've made a mistake and you're shifted over by one stitch, because that will certainly affect how the fabric looks. So just continuing to work across, simple purl, simple, whoops, and purl. So I think you've got it at this point. I will skip ahead to the end. So again, at the beginning of the next row, if you've forgotten where you are in that 2-row repeat, which I always do, just look at the first vertical bar after the one on the edge and identify that it is a purl stitch, so you know you're going to start row 5 with a simple stitch. So keep working in honeycomb stitch. For the dishcloth to be square, I recommend working a total of 23 rows. If you haven't counted as you go, the easiest way to count rows is to count the return pass chains that are visible within each of your hexagons created by honeycomb stitch. With this variegated yarn, it's hard to see, so switching quickly to this project, I think the return passes here are very obvious because they're in a different color than the foreground honeycomb stitches. So you count each one of them, including the one at the very top, and that's the number of rows you've completed. So here's our row where we worked simple stitch across. You can see the return pass in orange. That's 1. There's number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21 and 22 are here. This yellow one's 21, and 22 is the one at the very top that we just finished working. So we've completed 22 rows. We have one more row to work for a total of 23. Now, because we worked a row of simple stitch all the way across at the bottom of the dishcloth, I'm going to make row 23 a row of simple stitch all the way across as well, just so that the top and bottom of the dishcloth match each other and look the same. But like I mentioned before, now that you're familiar with honeycomb stitch, you can just work the first and last row in honeycomb stitch if you prefer. Again, the Tunisian final stitch, one more time I'll demonstrate this. Insert under both loops from the side chain, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And work your very final return pass in the usual way. At the end of the return pass, you can work an optional loop to hang up your dishcloth from a hook by creating a chain of 8. So yarn over and pull through the stitch on the hook and do that a total of 8 times. That makes a decent length loop that you can use to hang up the dishcloth. You can make it longer if you want. And then we're going to attach that chain to the project by working a slip stitch into the stitch on the very right edge of the work that we normally skip. So insert into that stitch, yarn over, and pull through that stitch as well as the stitch on the hook, and that is called a slip stitch. That's a little tight there, so I struggle with that. Now we're going to finish the top of the dishcloth and make it look nice and finished by working slip stitch all the way across. So insert from right to left in the usual way, yarn over, and pull up a loop, but then pull that loop through the original loop on your hook. Insert in the usual way, yarn over, and pull through both loops. And once you get good at this, you can do it like I just did, where you pull through both at the same time. But if not, just pull through one and then pull through the other. So insert from right to left, yarn over, and pull through both loops. So that is a slip stitch, and we're going to do it all the way across, and what it does is it creates a nice chain of V's along the top of the dishcloth that looks very similar to the bottom where we worked our foundation chain. So just keep working slip stitches into each one of your vertical bars along the top. Just going to speed that up a little bit. We're almost at the end now. The only things I have left to show you are finishing, which is my least favorite part of any project. But it does need to be done, and it's important. Now we've arrived at the second last one, so work a slip stitch into it as usual. And then for the final Tunisian stitch, we're going to insert the hook into it in the same way, so identify the 2 loops on the side, insert the hook under both, and then just complete a slip stitch, so yarn over and pull through both loops. Now we are finished. It's time to cut the yarn, leaving about a 6 centimeter or 2.5 or 3 inch tail to pull up on the remaining loop. until the free end comes right out. So just pull that loop out. And then thread this yarn tail onto a tapestry needle. And we're going to weave it into the work or sew it in. And the goal here is to weave it in firmly enough that it won't unravel. So start by just giving it a tug, neaten it up a little bit if the stitches have come loose, and then just start sewing it in. You want to go in at least 2 directions. So I'm not going very far in this direction because the white color will really stand out against the orange. So I'm going back up to where there's a lot of that white so that it'll be more hidden. And I'm just going underneath some of my vertical bars. I'm splitting the yarn in some of the chain, the return pass chain as well. If you split the yarn a little bit, it creates more friction so that the woven in yarn tail will stay in place. Pull it through and pay attention to your tension here. Make sure you're not creating a pucker or a gather. And then start weaving it back in the other way through the same stitches is what I usually do, and that keeps it nice and snug. Now I've pulled it quite tight just to get my needle off, so I just make sure that I don't affect the tension of the project. Just give it a tug to make sure that it's flat and smooth. And then cut off the remaining tail. You do have to go and repeat that process for the yarn tail at the beginning of the work as well. Just do that the same way and you're all finished. So here we have a dishcloth that is sturdy, it's interesting, it's got different colors in it, it has a loop to hang it up. I think it's super cute. Once you get going and good at this, you can do this in probably less than 45 minutes. The bottom edge and the top edge do look a little different because of that row of simple stitch. So you can skip that once you're really good with honeycomb. There's no need to do that. I hope you enjoy this relaxing technique as much as I do. There's so many possibilities with Tunisian crochet. Check out my website if you're interested in other free patterns or some of my finished products to see what can be done with this versatile technique. I hope this video helped. Thank you for watching.